Are you about to go into mediation? Has someone just said the word mediation to you and you go into sweats? Well, today's episode will be great for you because we're going to be talking about the top 5 things to prepare before going to mediation so you don't freeze, fold, or fail. Welcome, Mum.
Hello, Laura. Hello, everyone.
Now, we sat down and we did a little brainstorming session about the things that we think people really, really need to do before they go in to mediation. And they're not necessarily things that a lawyer may tell you to do. Some of them are, and some of them are our ideas, which I think will really help. So we're going to be talking about making sure you know what you want and what you don't want. We're going to talk about creating a negotiation plan based on the personality types. We're going to be talking about the documentations you need in Australia before mediation. We're going to talk about disclosure. And we're also going to be talking about your plan that you create for after, whether you fail or you succeed. And we're also going to be touching on the topic of family violence and how to go about mediation with that. So a reminder that there will be discussions of family violence. So if you feel triggered by that, please call 13 11 14 Lifeline. Or if you're experiencing family violence, please call 1-800-RESPECT. And a reminder that Mum is not your lawyer, even though she is an amazing lawyer, she's not your lawyer. And I am not a lawyer. So today, this is an educational discussion. Let's get to the jingle and let's get started.
Hello, I'm Laura, divorced mother of 3, and I'm here with my mother, Lynette Galvin, with 35 years' experience in family law. You're listening to the Divorce Course podcast. Through our candid discussions, we hope to help you through your divorce or de facto separation. We will be answering the most commonly asked questions and covering the stages and steps that you will face on your way to freedom.
Now, about a month ago, Mum, we said that we were going to start up the comments rewards again because we get so many great comments sent to us. And I thought it was about time we started to go back to, if you write us a good comment, we choose you at random, you may get a free chat with Mum. Now, a lovely person called Lean, and you'll know who you are by what I read out as your comment. You can email us at thedivorcecoursepodcast@gmail.com to get your free chat. And if you would like to get a free chat with Mum, you can also comment. Over the next month, we will be doing another draw for a comment that's been given on Spotify, Apple, or YouTube, and you can go into the draw to get a free chat with Mum. So this is Lean, and Lean said on Spotify, another fantastic episode of the Divorce Course podcast. I have listened so many times to all the episodes, and I'm so grateful to Lynn and Laura for the most amazing education they provide us with. There's no other podcast like this one and no other course that gives us the information we all need. It makes it so much easier to face the long road through some sometimes very dark tunnel, to know that Laura and Lynn are walking beside us every week. So thank you so much, Mum and daughter team. That was a wonderful comment.
I love that.
From Lynn. So
Yes.
I've chosen that one to go
All
through.
right.
Mum, you get to have a chat
I look
with
forward
Lynn.
I look forward to talking to her.
All right, and we will be doing another draw in November. I'll be putting a note in the diary so we don't forget. November for another chat with Mum. So, Mum, let's get started.
Okay.
And let's talk about, just before we get started, can you just give us a general quick summary of what a mediation is if this is the first episode anyone's ever listened to?
Okay. So a mediation is when the two people who are in dispute, you and your ex generally, get together in various degrees of getting together. You might not be in the same room, but with the help of someone who is experienced in back and forward and bargaining, it's an attempt for you two, with the help of someone, to try to reach agreement to avoid going to court.
And I think that avoid going to court is the big one, because I think sometimes people think, oh, well, if we go to court, so be it. But I encourage anybody who's thinking that to go onto TikTok or go onto Instagram and go and watch some videos of people who are going through the family court system and ask yourself, do you really want to be put through that? And look, a lot of us don't get the choice. You have to go sometimes because you can't choose who your ex-partner is going to be. And I know they say it takes 2 to tango, but it only takes one person to get you to court. But
one unreasonable
person to get you to court. But it is a good thing to keep in mind that court can be expensive, horrible, and life-changing to some people.
And uncertain.
Yeah, yes.
It takes a long time.
Why, Mum, why is it important for people to be prepared for a mediation?
Well, I think we chose the topic, didn't we, Laura? We were looking at something that is relevant to everybody, whether they are thinking about going to court, whether they're in court for property, whether they're in court for children, And even if they've had a mediation, they may well be headed for another mediation because that's the emphasis that the Family Law Act is putting now on people to try to keep them out of court. I suppose it's like banging their heads together and see if they possibly could agree. And then if that fails, then you are facing court.
Let's go with number one, and that's figuring out what you want and what you don't want. And I know that sounds so basic and simple, but sometimes people, I think, don't know what they want or don't know what they don't want. And they only realize it when and it's been put on the table in mediation and they realize, wait, I actually don't want that.
Or I can't bear to part with this.
Yes, and you've already spent half the day on mediation. So it's so important to sit down and do that. Is that kind of like your non-negotiables? What do you call it, Mum?
I hate to call it non-negotiables because I like to think that most things are negotiable in a way, but I think it's reality checking. I think sit down with yourself, okay, and ask how you would feel, for instance, if you couldn't get the house. Ask how you'd feel if the car was going to be the other car and not this one. And just like look at your perfect world and what you would really like, and then start thinking about the stuff that you just can't bear the thought of parting with. And so you're reality checking. I really want the house. How likely is that I'm going to get the house? I'd better prepare myself for not getting the house and go and do some looking around in units and apartments and things. So you've got a plan B. I think it's sad when people, like you said, face it in the mediation because the planning and thinking about your reality, you can do that without paying someone to sit there as a mediator and potentially lawyers and barristers. And this is stuff you can do on your own before you go in.
You don't want 4 very expensive people watching you while you think about this. You want to
it'll be
100% knowing.
It'll be 5. It'll be 5. If you've got a barrister and a solicitor and so have they and the mediator and your ex, I could imagine how overwhelming that would be, and you may not be able to think straight. So you'll feel better if you've got it written down.
So you said non-negotiables is the wrong word to have. So what about nice to haves and must haves?
Yes. Yeah, that's true. You can do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And think of some arguments why.
Right.
And pros and cons for you.
Okay.
For what you want. Because sometimes when people say, I really want the house, I really want the house, really want the house, and you drill down a little bit, it's that they are perhaps running a business from the house or they haven't ever looked anywhere else for a house. It's just this kind of reality check. Go in there knowing everything, having faced up to the worst, right? And if you've got, like you said, non-negotiables, you think of non-negotiables, face what would happen if you lose that thing, because you may well if it goes to court, because you've got some person you don't know, just dividing stuff, selling stuff all over the place. You've got no control. Yeah.
So I guess with children's matters, you'd be trying to plan out, how you'd like your custody to look.
Yeah.
And who?
Yeah. Yeah, what's best for the kids? I think that's a completely different thing. And I suppose you can't talk yourself out of what you in your heart believe is best for the kids, but you can tailor any proposals with the view to their best interests. So, if you've got neurodivergent children and they need to be in their own bed every night and they're going to take a long time to move into overnight somewhere else, have faced all of that and put in place some things so that you can agree on something and you can put a proposal. But you're right, Laura, especially with kids. And I don't mean nights, like everyone gets hung up, it's 4 nights and what is the other one, 10 nights or 5 nights. No, it's that what's in their best interest. That's the real key. Okay. And so, you get stuck sometimes. People absolutely adamantly don't think the children should spend any time, or they believe the children should only spend supervised time. And so wiggle room is hard to achieve.
So it's a bit harder with kids, but really what you're saying is sit down and brainstorm what's the best interest of the children and write that down and have that written down. Have a think about where are they sleeping, who's taking them to school, all of the things, who's going to be in charge of making medical decisions, what do the kids need and what needs to be negotiated, and actually have a brainstorming session way before you go. Yeah.
And you can also look at, okay, this is what little Johnny needs, right? How can we achieve that and still get agreement because the other person wants more time. And people come up with very creative things, such as they can go, but they come home at about 6:30, have the bath and go to bed if it's got to be in that house. Just think about what the child actually needs and what the other person actually is wanting as well. And you come up with creative things.
I think you've discussed before with property where you can have these columns. And you can have one column where you list everything you want in the property, and on the other column, you list everything they want for property. And then a middle column, what do they put in the middle column?
Yes. So we often do that with values, right? His value, her value, agreed value. That the middle column is tricky if you're doing it that way with what you actually want. I mean, I'd be reluctant, as if I was in mediation, to let the other person know the things I really, 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 really want in case they become so-and-sos and insist that I can't have it. So what the court is doing, and I don't know if this is what you're thinking about, what the court says is, look, we're not doing furniture fights. You've heard me say that before. One of you make two columns of roughly equal value, and everything that you have just divided into two columns. And the other person can choose one of those columns to keep. And so the person making the lists has got the incentive to make them even, and the person who chooses one is stuck with whatever is in that column.
So when you used to make us dish up dessert, if we dished up dessert, my brother got to choose which dessert he got. So it makes it incentive to be fair.
Because you put too much. Yeah, that's
yes.
right. Yes.
Okay.
There you
So
go.
there's something you can do for property. Mum, should they have like their proposal written out, ready to go before they go to mediation?
I reckon it's handy. I think there's a risk if you look too polished that the other side's going to think you've this is set in stone, you know.
Yeah.
That's right. But you've got the structure of the orders. If you do the course, you know what orders are going to be in there. And maybe the only thing different for children is the number of days. Maybe with property, the only thing different is how much one person's going to pay the other. So you might even leave those spots blank and have several copies, right? So they can be, if you've done that work, they end up being the document that travels between the parties, and you will get the terminology you like. And because they're in a court-ordered form, I hope they're in a court-ordered form, you won't get into a lot of disruption and ultimately perhaps disagreement when they see how those orders look in an order form. So I like to take a document already drafted, and I do leave blanks to be filled in so that I don't look like I'm too willing or too bossy about the thing.
So that's a lot of work that you really should do before you walk in, because I have heard of people where they walk in, they've done no prep, they haven't thought about anything, and their ex has done all the prep, and they give them the document and they say, this is what I'm proposing. And you're already starting on the back foot if you've done nothing, because you've got nothing to work from. You're just looking at what they've got.
That's right. And there's the magic in having a copy, a hard paper copy. It involves all of your senses. So if your proposal is in the air, it's just words, and theirs is on paper, yours will get lost. It will. Especially because the mediator is often taking messages from one room to another, backwards and forwards. So you tell your mediator something, you tell them that they're allowed to tell the other side because everything otherwise is confidential. And then the mediator walks the 20, 30 steps to the other room and give their version of what they remember that you said, you know. Again, so I even put my little proposals and counter proposals to and fro in writing.
Okay.
But as much as I can't remember it, as much as anyone else, but there's a paper trail there.
Right. Okay. If anyone is worried about what their proposal should be, or they don't understand any of the aspects of property or children's, of course you can go listen to some of our other episodes on how to create a parenting plan, or the 12 agreements in custody, or you can learn about property percentages, etc. Go and listen to some of our episodes. Of course, if you're a course member, you can literally go and do all the lessons and use our worksheet. Let's get on to the next one, Mum, and that is building your negotiation plan. That's the second thing we think is pretty important, and a lot of people don't do this either, but you've your divorce personality type by now. If you listen to our podcast, it's either amicable, high conflict, avoidant, or manipulative and controlling, or a bit of both. And so you know that your ex is going to be a particular way when you're in the mediation. So what kind of negotiation plans can they put in place? Let's start with amicable to start with.
Okay. So don't take anything for granted with amicable. I have seen people go into a mediation reasonably amicable, but when you drill down, it's not so amicable.
Right.
So don't take anything for granted with amicable. If you think you have agreed on a proposal, still get yours in, put it in writing. And I would preface this by saying something like, this is my understanding of where we're at with the agreement.
So with amicable, you're just saying it's really important just to lock them in and don't take it for granted and be prepared that it may not be amicable once you get in there if you say no to something. Okay.
Particularly if you may think your case is amicable, but you actually have just been saying yes all the time.
Yeah. And I guess if you are amicable, you've been talking to your ex, you might be aware of the bits that you guys are stuck on. That you are both stuck on. And you may go, okay, well, the argument they're going to say is about this. So could you write down some potential compromises that you would be willing to live with?
Yeah. Yep. I think it's always useful to ask yourself, and this will be every time, what about my proposal? What is it about my proposed orders that they're going to kind of choke on and not be able to agree? And what could I do to make it palatable for them?
Right.
So you anticipate their arguments and have some alternatives. We are asking people almost to mentally go through and predict what's happening in the mediation. But of all of the people in the world, your ex well enough to know how they're going to behave and what's going to come up.
Well, particularly you've probably already had the arguments multiple times outside of mediation, so you know what their argument is going to be. So you can write it down and come up with some compromises. And that, I guess, comes to manipulative and controlling. We've talked about mediation. Is it mediation or manipulation? Go and listen to that episode if you're dealing with a narcissist. And we've done another episode as well, can you really mediate with a narcissist? And we really drill down a bit more into that. So go and listen to those episodes. But one thing that I think we drew out of those episodes that we can pop in here, at least one of the tips was to be aware and brainstorm with your friends what kind of horrible, triggering comments are going to come across the table at me, and what can my response be so that it doesn't knock me for six.
Yes. I think that is exactly what they're going to do, and they're going to try and, like having a toothache, and they're going to probe at it. I think your response is, look, I've put up with this for X number of years, and it's nothing new. It's anticipated. We've got a narcissist playbook that they know about, so I'm not surprised. And just because they write it down or tell the mediator, it doesn't make it true.
Yeah.
And you know other things that a manipulative and controlling person will do? They will put things in their proposal that to the mediator sounds quite normal, innocuous, no drama, but when they bring it into you and they tell you about it, suddenly you have to tell them, well, no, that was a wedding present from my deceased grandma and I can't part with it, or that's been passed down my family. So you'll expect those things. And it is funny, if they'll also try to do things to hurt you, and so raise things they've never mentioned before and make allegations they've never raised before. But look, it's handy if you aren't going to be able to mediate because they love this stuff, right? And you may not get too far with them, but if that's the case, at least you'll know what nonsense they're going to be bringing up and you can get your ducks in a row for that.
And
next stage.
I'm going to say something naughty, and you should be fully focusing on coming up with finishing your mediation and getting an agreement. But if you have a bingo game going, and they say horrible things to you with a friend, you can cross them out and see who was right. Don't do that. Don't be caught with a bingo sheet that has that.
Of course not.
It might make it...
Maybe just a list.
Maybe it'll take the sting out of it if they go and say horrible things and you're like, oh, look, I foresaw that. And have some potential responses ready to go so that you aren't shocked or have to think about it. You can just swipe it aside, basically.
Yes. And the other thing, of course, with a person who is really manipulative and controlling, they may show signs of reaching agreement and you're thinking, thank the Lord, and you'll make compromises until you're nearly bleeding, and then they won't sign it at the end of the day. So be ready for that. I think sometimes if you know your ex is not interested in settling, maybe don't take a lawyer to the mediation or a barrister, or maybe have a lawyer on tap to talk to about things. Maybe just book a half day instead of a full day.
So
all of those things, so you don't use all your money up before you have to go to court, because they're the ones you're most likely to have to go to court.
So please go listen to our Can You Mediate with a Narcissist and the other Mediation or Manipulation. And you can also listen to our episode, Do I Need a Lawyer for My Mediation? So go and listen to those episodes if that's for you. Now let's touch on high conflict, Mum. What kind of negotiation strategies should people be planning for a high conflict?
I think you write out your chronology, right, of your events. They'll probably argue so many things. So have your proof with you if you can. And in the old days, that was bringing in a big suitcase of all of the documents. They may all be on your phone, but bring a charger.
We've had some
have facts.
really great success stories of people who've gone into mediation with their chronology of maybe the abuse they've suffered, or their chronology of the wastage that someone's done, or the chronology of whatever. And it's all written there in black and white. They show the mediator and go, this is the reason why I'm asking for this percentage because of blah, blah, blah. And Mum, you said put with it the case that backs up your argument.
Yes.
Have multiple copies of it. And we did hear that great success story where the lady walked in, had that done, put it in the mediation, and the ex was like, have you been going to law school? and got through it with a high conflict. So facts are key. And I think chronologies, Mum, I think we do have an episode on that. The one thing you should do for your mediation, I'll put that in the list of show notes as well.
Because just with high conflict, when you do produce that evidence, when you have that chronology, you're really, like your ex knows that stuff. They already know this. You're actually writing it. So their legal advisor looks at it, looks at the cases, looks at things, and then they are telling your ex, oh, actually, they're right.
Yeah. And they've got this chronology that could go straight away into an affidavit. And
absolutely.
You're in trouble. So, yes. Now let's talk about avoidant. What negotiating strategy works best in mediation with avoidance?
I think they get very shocked if you give them a very detailed set of orders. I think it's probably best to do dot points and maybe the stuff they're getting first, because I think a lot of avoidant people, it's just fear. I think sometimes people seem avoidant, but actually they're manipulative and they're just sitting pretty and they're not wanting to. But a true avoidant person is mostly fear. So if you can get them to mediation, then the first thing they see from you is something in writing that says that they get whatever it is, they get this, they get that, and then they can start to concentrate on the rest of the process.
That's some preparation work that maybe your lawyer won't mention to you, but definitely be prepared. And the only person who can really prepare yourself for the type that you're dealing with is yourself, because you'll know your ex better than most people.
And you know your life. Yeah.
All right, so let's get to the next thing that we need to prepare, Mum, and that is your documents. So how do people figure out in Australia what documents they need for mediation?
Okay. West Australia is slightly different. But what you do is you go to the Central Practice Direction, Family Law Case Management Central Practice Direction, and you'll find that on the Federal Circuit and Family Court of Australia website under Resources or under Practice Direction. And then you turn to page 16 of that, and it'll be headed Dispute Resolution. We should talk about this, Laura. There's mediation, there's dispute resolution, there's a conciliation conference, and there's a family law dispute resolution.
And it's all the same thing.
And pretty well, it's all different versions of the same thing.
Right.
So mediation, dispute resolution is the same thing. Yeah.
Okay.
And family law dispute resolution practitioner is about kids, but it's the same sort of thing.
Okay.
Okay, so they've got the biggest, broadest term is dispute resolution. So look at page 16, and it says that within 5 months of the date of the commencement of any proceedings, the court is going to ask you to go to dispute resolution. And this is, even if you've done mediation before, then you're going to have to do it again when you go to court. And then there's a list of things that you have to give the court for that sort of the next mediation, a court-ordered mediation. But you still have to do it, even if you're not in court. You've got to look at the documents in page 18, and it tells you that even if even if you're not even anywhere near the court, you're still bound by the court's requirements. So confidential case outline, this is on page 19, a copy of family violence orders, all other information required, a certificate of dispute resolution for completion by the mediator. So look between pages 16 and 21, I think. You have to provide a confidential case outline document, and there's a form for that.
And that's on the court website?
On the court website.
Can I just check? So even though someone listening to this hasn't even filed in court, they don't even intend on going anywhere near court, if they go to mediation, it's expected they file a confidential case outline. Okay. Yep.
A copy of your current or previous family violence orders, all other information and documents reasonably requested by the mediator, and a certificate of dispute resolution for the mediator or the family dispute resolution provider to fill in, because you need that if you're going to go to court. And they will normally require you to personally attend, but if you can't, by electronic means. So yes, so documents also include a list of your costs and disbursements in the proceeding to date. If you're not in court, I don't think that applies. An estimate of anticipated costs expected to be incurred in the remaining part of the procedure. This is if you've got a lawyer, they've got to give you this information, and the estimate of the length of the final hearing and how much it might cost altogether.
So basically they want to know how much your lawyer fees are, how much they potentially could be if you don't finish this mediation and you end up in court. So it's just trying to scare yourself really into mediating and coming up with a good
that's right.
solution.
Well, it's a thing, isn't it? When you're mediating, and say you're $100,000 apart in each of you can look at the document that was prepared before you went to court, or your estimate that you did, and let's say $50,000 is a fairly cheap court case, right? If it's going to cost each of you $50,000 to go to court, why don't you just split the difference and you go down 50 and that way you haven't had to wait a year or more for a trial. And if you do get to court and you're right, so to speak, and you get that $100,000 that you insisted you needed, and yes, the court agrees, you do still have to pay your own legal fees for that. You know, there's been Calder Bank orders, but even then they only pay an offer, they only pay a little bit. So, and what if you lose? You still have to pay your lawyers, potentially pay some of their lawyers' fees, and give the $100,000 over.
Okay, so let's just duck back to the confidential case outline, because that seems to be the main document that needs to be done. What is a confidential case outline?
It's just like a summary for the mediator to run their eye through. It's the facts, you know, and it talks about what it is that you think your case is about, and the other person will hand theirs in, and it will say what they think the case is about. A confidential case outline can't be used in subsequent court hearings because everything that happens in that mediation is confidential.
Okay.
So if you're making concessions, they can't then tell the judge about it later on.
And is it relatively easy to fill out?
It's not that bad.
Yeah.
I've taken people through it.
Okay.
It's if it's court, you need one in the approved form. If you're going before court, I don't think they want it in an approved form, but I would do it in the approved form because you're going to if the mediation fails, you're going to be sent back for another one.
And then at least you've already got the court document done.
That's right.
Okay.
And you've covered everything.
Let's jump on to disclosure. So disclosure is the next thing you need to prep for mediation. And I know people will be screaming into their headphones right now going, I've done my disclosure. It's my ex that hasn't done my disclosure. So look, I've done some really good episodes on disclosure for finding out what your exes are. But Mum, what do people need to prep for disclosure for mediation?
Yeah, you need to have found out enough for you to be confident that you can make a proposal, an offer, or evaluate one of their offers. If you don't have enough information from them, then maybe mediation shouldn't happen yet, right? But be careful of full disclosure.
Need to start doing your disclosure but have no idea where to start? Feeling overwhelmed about mediation coming up? Or just trying to deal with negotiating with a manipulative ex? Then you need to go to thedivorcecourse.com.au to go to the free resources section where you can get a mediation checklist, a disclosure checklist, a word salad, read a letter like a pro checklist, and also a before you go checklist. Get ahead of the game and be organised and ready, as this handy checklist, along with the accompanying episodes of the podcast, will be perfect for you. All you need to do is go to thedivorcecourse.com.au and go to the free resource section and download the free checklists today.
Be careful of full disclosure, where I see people who are getting hung up on one or two bank statements when really you can prove things another way, or you can work it out another way. If someone's taken money from an account, right, you're entitled to assume it's somewhere. So just if you can see where it came from, that's an asset. That's what you're working on. If they've spent it somehow, or on reasonable living expenses, some of it, it's up to them to prove it, that they did. Otherwise, put in the amount that you see. Don't get too hung up on what they're doing, because probably 50% of the people I talk to who are having problems with disclosure are trying to force their ex, or wanting their ex to disclose something that ultimately would help their ex. So what I try to do is say, have you got enough information? Can you do guesstimates? Have you got a rough idea what all of this is? And would that be enough to make you able to assess an offer, for instance?
Okay.
And make sure you've got your nose clear.
Let's talk about that. So people preparing for mediation, your prep work is to do your disclosure. Now, we've got a really good free downloadable checklist of all the things you need for disclosure. You can download that on our website. You can go to thedivorcecourse.com.au/disclosure checklist, or you can just go to the divorcecourse.com.au and you can go to the free resources section and just choose the disclosure checklist option, and you can get a free downloadable checklist that you can work through at your own pace, as long as you get it done before your mediation. And that will help you significantly. And it's a couple of pages long, and it's a fair bit of work. And that's your work that you've got to do, aside from worrying about your ex's disclosure. And I hear people say, Mum, well, my ex hasn't handed in his disclosure or their disclosure. I'm going to wait till they do theirs and then I'm going to hand mine in. Is that a good idea?
No. At all times, you want to be the perfect person. You need to be a model litigant. And the obligation doesn't say that, the Family Law Act doesn't say that you have to give these documents if they give you theirs or after they give you theirs. No, there's an obligation on you and an obligation on your ex. And you don't want to be one of those people who gets before a judge and who hasn't done it, because there's a whole lot of trouble coming down your way. And of course, also, before you can point fingers and dob them in, you need to make sure your house is in order, so to speak, that you've done all of the disclosure that's required. And I suggest taking it with you to the mediation, particularly if you've got it in an electronic document. We show you how to do that disclosure document. Yeah, and that way, if you've got a high conflict person, then you've got your evidence right there.
I think also if you are one of those people who've done your disclosure, you're waiting for mediation and your ex hasn't given you everything that you think, there are some other ways you can do your own disclosure for them. Mum calls it discovery. We've got a great episode called DIY Disclosure and disclosure delays, how you can overcome them. Go listen to those 2 episodes if that's affecting you in any way, and hopefully that can help you move forward for your mediation. Now, Mum,
very good point.
The next thing that we talk about, number 5, is a plan for failure or success.
Yes. So I worry when people say my mediation failed. It's, as a word, it just sort of, my mediation failed, as just so sad.
Yeah.
No, look, it might not have lived up to your expectations, but you're getting there, right? It's one of the things you had to do.
It's a step.
And it's a step, that's right. And so you need to know your options, what you're going to do if it doesn't get agreement, what you're going to do if you do get agreement, and have those clear in your mind so that mediation failed isn't the way you think it might be. We didn't get an answer, but, for instance, I now know what their case is going to be. I know what the argument is. Or we didn't get an agreement, but I can tell that we're very close. We didn't get an agreement, but I know I can go to court. I've got my evidence ready. I've done my disclosure. I'm all ready to go. And I did my chronology. And now I know I'll do this, then I'll go to court, and eventually we'll end up in another mediation. So it's only a step. So few, I wouldn't have thought, I don't know what the stats are now, but personally, and I'm sorry to the court, I know they oblige people to go to mediation early, but sometimes a mediation happens just too soon. Sometimes you end up there, one of you is still very raw emotionally. And the hideous situation of a lot of people is they're mediating while they're still living under one roof. So you haven't got any airspace to think about solving things. So it might not be that it's never going to settle. It might be that wasn't the right time, or there was the document missing, or there was some other impediment. And that's not to say it won't work next time, because so few matters actually end up in trial.
Well,
so few.
I was just looking up the overall statistics from the Australian Mediation Association, and they suggest over 85% of disputes are settled through mediation. I don't necessarily know if that includes family.
Do you know, though, I studied through the Australian Institute. I have a certificate for arbitration. And all of that work that I did with them was before you were obliged to go to mediation, earlier than going to court. So what would normally happen was you would go to court, you'd have some couple of court attendances, exchange some documents, then you'd be sent to mediation before you ended up in the witness box or a final hearing. And so those matters were very ripe for settling. I don't think we hear that sort of statistic anymore. But think of it as the first mediation, okay, not the only mediation. Okay. I don't think 85% in family law pre-filing mediations, I don't think anyone could sustain that.
No. I think there are also the factors you need to be considering is what type of mediator have you got? If you try the mediator that you guys have, can you potentially say, okay, well, we didn't get there completely, but I found a more skilled mediator that may be able to help us. Would you like to try it again and have a letter inviting them to mediation again? You could have a letter outlining everything you've agreed to already.
Yep, we do that. So far we've done this and keep on with your negotiations, because I think that number that you mentioned, Laura, that's probably the percentage of people who ultimately either resolve by mediation or by negotiation afterwards.
Yeah.
Don't give up.
Yes. And look, it says only approximately 3% of separating parents go to court to decide parenting arrangements, and that's the Australian Institute of Family Studies as well. 3%. It's really likely that you will agree either in mediation or after mediation. You've got to have a plan. We've got a good episode on Help My Mediation Failed, and you can go and listen to that episode, and we take you through 40 minutes of steps that you can take to get yourself to that next level. But also, Mum, you need a plan if your mediation doesn't fail. What do you do?
That's right.
What do you do afterwards? If you walk out and you go, great, we came to an agreement, and then you walk out the door and then you hear crickets for 2 weeks and you're like, am I supposed to be doing something? What's happened?
Yes, so that's also, you have to have a plan for if your mediation succeeds or apparently succeeds.
Yeah.
Because until there's something in a document outside of the mediation, then it's still, your situation's normal. If you've got deadlines for filing documents in the court, you have to keep up to date with those. I call it settler's remorse, that sometimes people will step out of the mediation, high intensity mediation, focused, you might be tired, agreements reached, you wake up in the morning and go, what did I just do? And that is often the reason why there's silence on the other side.
Right.
Or that you might think, oh goodness, did I really do the right thing? So there are steps you can take.
Okay, and we do have a really good episode called What Happens If You Change Your Mind After Mediation. I'll put that in the link as well. So, but Mum, if you walk out and you're like, yes, we've agreed, they've agreed, we've agreed, you walked out the door, you're still agreeing, how do you get that agreement to be done?
Okay, so if you don't hear from them, take the initiative. Even if you think they're going to hear from you, you're going to hear from them, take the initiative and do them an email, mark it without prejudice if you like, because you don't want them to use it in the court if they don't reach agreement yet. And say, hi, yesterday was good. Here's what I think came out of the mediation, or you can attach the document. How should we do this? Would you like to do the application and I'll do the consent orders, or would you like to, if you do all of the documentation, I'll handle whatever, lodging it at the court or writing. So just kind of, or I look forward to receiving the documents as soon as possible. So you keep the ball rolling, right? And then if nothing is happening on the other side, you can't force someone to settle, and you can't force someone to keep on agreeing if they failed. And I think I'd name it again. Hi, haven't heard from you. I'm assuming, therefore, that you've got an issue with the agreement. Do you want to go to a further mediation where we can talk about it confidentially? I know we've got court next week. But what the court does, Laura, is they list a mention date, usually about 2 weeks after the first court mediation. And that's when the judge or the registrar goes, okay, how did it go? If you haven't settled, what's holding everything up? And you might be able to find one thing that everyone's stuck on, and then they can work on that. Because a family law matter it's a big knot, and it's undoing bits. It's a knot of whole little different strands. And so as long as you're on the right track, you might be able to catch and hold the stuff that you did agree on, even if there's one thing still in dispute.
Okay. But if you can get all of it agreed, you put it in writing, then you do consent orders, get a lawyer to check it, and then you file it in the court and you're done.
Right.
So you've got to have a plan. The number 5 top thing we want you to do before you go into mediation is have a plan. What am I going to do if we come to agreement? What am I going to do if I only half come to agreement? And what am I going to do if we don't come to any agreement? Have all of that already organised, already planned out, so that when you are sitting at 5 to 5 in a mediation room and you haven't got to an agreement, one, you don't panic and just say, fine, I've only got 5 minutes to lock in this agreement. I'll agree to whatever you want, because that can be a tactic that people do. But if you know, actually, I've got a plan, we haven't come to an agreement, I know what my plan is moving forwards, I'm not that upset and I'm not going to be pressured into agreeing to something I don't want.
Yes.
So if you've got plan B, C, D, E, F, G in the back of your head, negotiating tactics that some unscrupulous people may use of stress, of the pressure, the time, the stress, all of that is going to be alleviated because you've done your prep work. So can we just touch on family violence? If your ex has been emotionally abusive or physically abusive or any of the abuses at all, how do people prep for mediation in that way?
I think there needs to be a good element of self-care in there. So first of all, make sure you're going to be in separate rooms. And if it's a Zoom or some other video conferencing arrangement, make sure that you don't hear your ex's voice, that you don't have to see their face, all of that. That's the first bit, okay? And then I guess call them out on some of the stuff. Hopefully you'll use someone who's got a bit of experience in trauma and coercive control, because that is a field where people will continue to control. And I think that comes in when when they make proposals they know are going to really hurt your soul, with that. So expect it.
Okay.
Expect it.
And with Relationships Australia, it doesn't seem that they do tend to often do family violence mediations. That seems to be a trend that we're noticing.
Well, when I did mediation, we certainly didn't do any with family violence, simply because of the imbalance of power. You've got someone who's already had maybe years of bullying the other person, and the other person is conditioned to be bullied. It's not their fault. And so you may end up with something really that's not fair, and you're continuing the abuse. Then the court has put an emphasis on the mediation, and they are I think their thinking is, why should someone not only have been subject to family violence during the marriage, but then as a result of that, why should they be denied the opportunity to get a mediation and avoid court? So it depends on the personalities of the people who are negotiating, and sometimes, Rose, I think it's to protect the mediator, because it's awful. I've done some where I've had to have a personal security alarm on and sat in the room, and it's not safe. And they do a lot of face-to-face.
So potentially maybe you could try for private mediation or ask for mediation via Zoom call, etc. But they're just some things to maybe consider if you are facing family violence.
And of course, the central practice direction states quite clearly that you don't have to go to mediation or do any of the things that the course requires of you if it makes you unsafe. So if you can't put yourself in a situation where you could mediate with the ex in any sort of sense, then you can write to the court and ask the registrar. You email to the registrar your documents and say, look, I haven't got a Section 60I certificate or I haven't got a genuine step certificate because of the family violence, and I can't mediate, I can't hear them, I can't see them, I can't negotiate.
Yeah.
They may let you through that way.
And or Relationships Australia will give you a 60I certificate saying it's unsuitable for mediation, and you will then have that for the genuine steps as well.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's for children.
Okay.
Yep.
Big hugs to those who have to deal with that.
Yes.
So the top 5 things, let's just run through them again to prepare for mediation that we think is a list of what you want and what you don't want, or as you've said, Mum, your nice to haves and your non-negotiables, I guess. Then you've got negotiation plan based on the personality type. That's number 2. Sit down and guess. Have a chat with your friends and say, what do you reckon my ex is going to throw at me, and how can I plan for that? Then doing your documents. You can go and have a look at the central practice directions. I'll put that in the show notes, and you can also ask your mediator directly, specifically the documents. They should give you a list of everything they require and a deadline by when they require them. Remembering if you're doing court-appointed mediation, they actually kind of give you a mark on how prepared you've been.
Yes.
So if you don't do the work, you get a little mark. Even though they can't tell the judge what happened in mediation, they can tell you if you made a genuine effort. And if you don't do the documents, that's not a genuine effort. Yeah. Then there's disclosure documents. Remembering we've got the free downloadable checklist you can get off our website. You can go to thedivorcecourse.com.au/disclosure checklist, or you can just go to our website and go to the free resources section and get that. And do your work, do your homework, and make sure you're the best kid in the class. Don't be one of those people who holds back because your ex is holding back. You want to have done all the right things. And then the last thing we want you to do is have a plan. Plan A, B, C, D, and E. What happens if you get everything sorted and negotiated? What are you going to do next? What are you going to do if only half stuff sorted? And what are you going to do if it all goes a bit sideways and nothing happens? And have those plans so you're not pressured into making an agreement. And please, if you are going into mediation, go and listen to those other episodes based on your divorce personality type. We've got one for avoidant. We've got just a normal mediation one for amicable, and we've definitely got one for high conflict and manipulative controlling, negotiating strategies and tactics of what to do if you have to go to mediation with that kind of person. Now, Mum, have you got anything you'd want to embroider on a cushion for the top 5 things to prep for mediation?
Yes, I think it's you are more prepared than the other person. Then you're just more likely to have it your way. So I think it's just got to be do the work.
Do the work and get your way, really.
Well, and I think the court identified most of the work in family law cases happened in the month prior to a full-blown trial. And then people would start settling. And it was because they finally did the work. So do the work.
Yeah.
Do the work.
Do the work. And it sucks because it's like a second job, and you're probably looking after the kids. You're probably doing all your full-time work as well. And then you've got this as your side hustle. And I guess once it's over, it's over. Yeah. And Mum, chocolate, tea.
and you're going to have to do the work anyway at some stage. So doing it at the front end, you're a step ahead if you have to go any further, but also you're giving yourself your best possible opportunity to settle on the day. So if your mediation fails, it won't be your fault. It won't be anything you haven't done. And you're fully equipped then to move on to your next phases of your court case, of your journey.
Now, if you are wanting to find all those episodes, you can find them in the show notes that we've just talked about, or you can also go to thedivorcecourse.com.au/blog. And basically we have every episode we've done in the last 2 years or 1 year. And you can just type in mediation and it'll bring up all the episodes related to that. Or you can just reach out to us and we'll send you the link.
And do we do the links to the practice management course?
I'll put that in the show notes.
Central practice direction, yes.
Yeah, we'll put the links to the central practice direction in there. Thank you, Mum, for your time. And thank you.
No worries,
thank you,
Laura.
Lean. I look forward to getting the email from you so we can have a chat with Mum. And if you'd like to go into the drawer to have a chat with Mum, then pop a comment in and let us know what you thought of this episode. And we will see you all next week. Thank you, Mum.
Bye, Laura. Bye, everyone.
If you found this podcast helpful, we'd love it if you could rate, review and subscribe. By doing so, you are spreading the word to help someone else just like you. Lynn would like to remind you that this podcast is general advice only, and you should always get legal advice in relation to your particular situation. And remember that the Australian laws may have changed since recording